Hi everyone, thanks for watching. In this video, I'll show you how to balance chemical equations. Remember from the last video that an equation can be more accurate by adding coefficients so that it is balanced. Like here, if I had a coefficient of 2 in front of Mg, meaning there are 2 magnesium atoms, then I would also need a coefficient of 2 in front of the MgO to have those same 2 magnesium atoms on the other side. Now there's the exact same amount of atoms on each side of the equation and it is balanced. The only thing we did not say in the last video is how do you know what coefficients to use? So let's take a look at a couple examples of exactly how to balance. The first thing we're going to do when we're balancing is start with the first element on the left and count the quantities of that element on each side. In this reaction, my first element is sodium, and on the reactant side there's only one sodium, so I'm going to write 1 beneath that symbol to keep track. On the product side, I find the same element symbol, Na. In this case, it says Na2, meaning there are 2 sodium atoms. If you have to balance them, which in this case we do, we're going to add a whole number coefficient to balance that element. If I've got 2 Nas in the product side, I also need 2 on the reactants, so a coefficient of 2 doubles the amount of sodiums here from 1 to 2, balancing that element. And that's pretty much the whole process. The only thing to do now is move on to the next element and repeat. My next element in this equation is oxygen. O2 means there's 2 oxygens, so I'll put a 2. Over here, there's only 1 oxygen, so they are not balanced. I need to make the product side have 2 oxygens. A coefficient of 2 will double everything in this entire formula, so now there's not 2 sodiums, there's twice as many 4, and there's not 1 oxygen, there's twice as many 2. Now my oxygens are balanced, but this does present a problem. My sodiums have changed to 4, which means this 2 no longer applies. Sometimes when you balance, you have to go back and forth and maybe erase or cross off some things you thought you were going to add in. This 2 now has to be changed to a coefficient of 4 so that the amount of sodiums remain balanced. The final coefficient list for this reaction is 4, 1, 2. Let's see that again with a different equation. Here my first element is aluminum and there's only 1. Finding aluminum on the products, I see that there's 2. To make those numbers balanced, I'll put a coefficient of 2, so now there's 2 aluminums on each side. My second element is oxygen, and there's 2, so I'll put a 2. On the product side, there are 3 oxygens. This is a common scenario where there's 2 on one side and 3 on the other. To fix that, we're going to multiply those up to 6 by putting a 3 in front of O2, so 3 times 2 gives me 6 oxygens. And if I put a 2 here, 2 times 3 gives me the same number, 6 oxygens on the right. This 2 though, remember, also doubles the aluminum from 2 up to 4, so the original coefficient of 2 I put in front of the Al in the reactants doesn't apply. I have to change that to a 4 so everything stays balanced. The final coefficient list is 4, 3, 2. And let's see one final example. Here my first symbol is N for nitrogen, but be careful because sometimes you'll see something like this happen. There is a nitrogen here, but there's also a nitrogen here. So even though it looks like there's one N, there's actually 2, and you have to keep track of all the N's on the entire side of the reaction. On the product side, here's the only nitrogen symbol, and there's also 2, so my N's are actually balanced. The next element is hydrogen, and I see that there's 4 of those. On the product side, here's hydrogen, but there's only 2. So if I put a coefficient of 2 to double that to a 4, now my H's are balanced as well. Changing colors for my oxygens just so we don't lose track. On the reactant side, I have 3 oxygens. And on the products, we run into a similar issue as we did with the nitrogen. There's 1 oxygen here, but there's also 2 oxygens here. 2 because that coefficient of 2 doubles the amount of O's. So remember, we've got to get the total of that atom on the entire side. 1 plus 2 is 3 oxygens. So I have 3 oxygens in the products and also 3 in the reactants, which means all of the elements are balanced. The final coefficient list is 1, 1, 2. And that concludes this video. Thanks for watching.